Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Modesty's Property Corner. This is our season 1, episode number 14. Today, we are rounding up the 3-episode series of the UK House Price Index. We've been on this for the past 2 weeks, and today we're just going to round it up and wrap it up. And it's been an interesting topic. It's been an interesting journey in the last 2 weeks, analyzing and trying to pieces what the information that Zoopla presented as per the house price index 1 year to February 2022. And we've been able to go through different aspects of that report, and last week we focused on the aspect of affordability and how affordability has impacted the house prices and the housing market and the activities. Today we're going to focus on demand, that part of the report that talks about demand, and we're going to see how demand in the marketplace, in the property market, in the UK property market, has affected house prices, has affected property activities, has affected the property transaction levels all together. Remember, this report was focused on what has happened in the property market 1 year to February 2022, but a lot of it also captures what has happened in the first quarter of 2022. So that's really interesting for us, because if we understand how the market has started or how the year has started in the property market, it will give us a good insight into how the year is going to pan out, or a few things that the report throws up that we could also learn from and be cautious about and be aware of while we navigate around the murky waters of property in the UK. So my name is E14. I remain your man and the director of Modesty Property Consultants Limited. We're a sales and lettings agency based in Luton in United Kingdom. And every Wednesday we come here, we educate ourselves, we enlighten ourselves, we inform ourselves on the latest happenings and events on the property market in the UK. Alright, so let's dive straight into the topic of today, which is focusing on demand and how it's affecting the housing market as far as the house price index report is concerned. So what do we know about what demand has been doing, or what demand has been like, especially in the first quarter of this year 2022? So earlier this year, buyer demand was really strong in the property market. The year started a lot stronger than expected. A lot of people thought that by the first quarter of this year that there will be a slowdown in the marketplace, but the market didn't slow down at all. The demand was really high, and of course, in every market, in every economy, the demand is what really determines the level of activity that happens in that marketplace, and property is not an exception. So earlier this year, the buyer demand was really strong. There was a surge in buyer demand this year, and what it has done is that it has increased the activity levels in the property market, and the market has been very active from the onset. Earlier this year, people didn't actually take time out to say okay, this is new year, we're going to slow down a bit. No, it was all full throttle from the onset, to the point that it has actually rivaled the level of activity that happened by this time last year, 2021. And remember that by this time last year, 2021, there was a stamp duty incentive. There was a stamp duty relief where everybody was rushing to complete before the end of March 2021, where everyone wanted to get in on the acts before the end of March 2021, and the stamp duty relief really pushed the market last year. So, but without the stamp duty relief, the market has held its own in this year alone, in the first quarter of this year. So the buyer demand has really been strong enough to even rival the level it was at the first quarter of last year. Again, something very prominent about demand in this first quarter of this year as well is the continuing trend of people reassessing what the home means to them. All right, and this trend has been like this since the first lifting of housing restriction or the property market restriction in 2020. Since that time, since May 2020, since the last second half of 2020, there has been this trend of people reassessing what the home means to them. So the home has taken a whole new dimension, a whole new definition, and a whole new meaning to people who live in homes. And because of that reassessment of what the home is and what the home needs are, it has also pushed demands as well, and it has affected buyer demands in the property market, because people are looking to reassess what the home needs for them, especially in regards to how they work. We have mentioned that a lot of people who are working from home now are looking to buy homes with that in mind, that this is not just going to be a home, it's going to be a place of work for me as well. Another area that needed attention as per buyer demand is the huge increases in housing values. Property values have appreciated astronomically, in the last 2 years, and sellers or homeowners are looking at it and saying, hang on a minute, this house I'm living in has appreciated so well, this is time for me to take advantage and move on. So homeowners and sellers are taking advantage of those huge property value increases. They are looking to lock in their gains, sell up, and then move on, maybe onto something bigger. Even those who want to downsize, or who have been looking to downsize, are now taking advantage of that, selling up and then downsizing, and maybe using that money for something else, investments, or leaving it for family or for inheritance purposes, whatever. But the fact is that home sellers are beginning to take advantage of the huge values that have accumulated in their properties, especially in the last 2 years. So, though demand has eased a little bit in the first quarter of this year compared to what it was last year, but it still remains that demand on average in the first quarter of this year is still 65% higher than the average demand in the last 5 years. That's how crazy, that's how bonkers the market has been. Yes, you cannot say that demand in the first quarter of this year matched what it was in the first quarter of last year. Remember that last year we had that stamp duty relief. This year the stamp duty relief was not there. It still rivaled last year, but it didn't surpass last year. It kind of slowed down a bit compared to what it was in the first quarter of last year. But even with that slowing down, listen to this, the demand in the first quarter of this year is still 65% higher than the average demand that has been recorded in the property industry in the last 5 years. How astonishing is that? Okay, so looking at demand overall, we'll be thinking, so what exactly has been fueling this demand, especially in the first quarter of 2022? There are two main factors that report threw up that has been affecting or influencing demand since the first quarter of this year. Number one is the demand for family houses. Remember, we talked about people reassessing the home, and people reassessing what the home needs are. So one of the factors that have been fueling demand recently is the demand for family houses. A lot of people who are moving, who are families, are looking for family houses with outdoor spacing, with enough spaces to accommodate their family and their workspace, with enough spaces to make the house more comfortable for them, more spacious. So demand for family housing has really, led in the surge for demand for properties in the UK, such that demand for 3-bedroom houses now is the demand for 3-bedroom houses is twice in the first quarter of this year, is more than twice the normal level that you would experience by this time of the year. The demand for 3-bed houses is more than twice the normal level that you would expect by this time of the year. That's how strong the demand for family houses have been. And these are some of the things that are pushing up the buyer demand in the marketplace. That's number one factor. Number two factor that has been pushing up buyer demands, or that's affecting buyer demands in the marketplace, especially in the first quarter of this year, is the increase. Is a stronger demand for properties, in UK cities. So the current trend now, especially in the first quarter of this year, is that looks like the property market in the UK cities are returning back to life. So this stronger trend in demand for properties in UK cities is now pushing up demand for properties overall or in general. So what that means is, because a lot of the restrictions have been lifted, life is returning gradually to UK cities. And now people are beginning to regain confidence in buying properties in the UK cities again. Because remember, during the pandemic, a lot of the UK cities were like ghost towns. The life in the city was completely dead. Life in the city was almost non-existent. And a lot of people who are panic mongers, they started screaming, oh, the UK city property market is dead, is buried, is gone, it's never going to be the same again, everybody's going to disappear, everybody's going to run away from the cities. And a lot of people abandoned their city properties, not really abandoned, but they sold up. Some people sold up, some rented it out or remortgaged it and took money out of it, and then they went to buy property somewhere else. Because a lot of people who live in the cities live there because they work there, all right, and because they want to be closer to work. They are looking to live closer to work, and then they felt that they had to live in the city. But when the way we work changed because of the pandemic, a lot of people moved out of the cities into the rural and semi-rural areas to buy up bigger properties, to live in those bigger properties with outdoor spaces. So it looked like life in the city was dead. It looked like property market in the city was dead. It was no longer there. But then, since the restrictions have been lifted, people are gradually returning to the cities, and life is gradually returning to the cities, and property activities have been picking up in the cities, and this has been fueled by demand in properties, by demand for properties in the city. Just to give you an example, since January, demand has increased by 5% in Birmingham, right? It has increased by 7% in Newcastle, right? It has increased by 20% in Blackpool, 20% since January in Blackpool, and then 19% increase in demand in Swindon. So you can imagine 20% surge in demand for properties in Blackpool since January. That just shows you how much confidence people are beginning to have again, and on properties in the cities, and they are returning to the cities. They are wanting to buy for different purposes. Some are returning to the cities to buy properties for residential purposes. Some are buying for investment purposes. Places like Blackpool are a great investment area for people, because in the summer I went to holiday Blackpool in the summer of 2020 or 2021. We went to holiday in Blackpool, and you need to see the amount of people who come to Blackpool from all over the world for holidays. So people who have holiday lets in Blackpool, it's a very good market for them, even if it's not a holiday let, because it's a holiday city, because it's an area that is bubbly with visitors and tourists, especially during the summer. Property activities in the Blackpool, I'm not surprised that it's picked up by about 20% since January. So, but apart from that, look at cities like Birmingham, look at cities like Newcastle, look at cities like Swindon. All these areas have experienced surge in demand since January, because life is gradually returning to the cities. Okay, so demand for properties in the cities have picked up because of that, ease of restriction. Semi-rural areas and rural areas are not left out either. There is also recorded increases in demand in these areas. Do not forget that some people are still, who moved out of the city want to remain in the city. Some people are still moving out of the city because they still feel property prices are too expensive in the city, and they would rather sell up or remortgage, take out equity from there, rent it out, and then move to somewhere cheaper and bigger and live there. People still have different assessments and reassessments of their homes and their home needs. Okay, so we have looked at the demand and the factors that are driving demand, and what sort of impact does demand have on activity levels in the property market. You see, the surge in demand earlier this year, sorry, excuse me, those of you on the surge in demand earlier this year really meant that activity levels in the property market have really picked up, because the market started very strongly demand-wise from the beginning of the year. Activity levels have really picked up, since the beginning of the year. I'm going to give you a little bit of statistics about, sales agreed, just to give you an insight into what sort of impact this demand factor is having on activity levels in the UK property market. So sales that have been agreed in first quarter of 2022 is 30% more than the same time in 2020. Sales that have been agreed in the first quarter of 2022 is 30% more than what it was in the first quarter of 2020. Remember that, the pandemic, the lockdown happened in March in 2020. So that's not that much of a surprise, really. But if you now compare 2022 first quarter sales agreed with 2021, you will see that it's not really as high as what it was in first quarter of 2021, because the first quarter of 2021 had that advantage of the stamp duty relief, right? So the sales that were agreed in first quarter of 2021 was higher than the one that was agreed in first quarter of 2022 because of that advantage and that edge as a result of the stamp duty relief. But it was 30% more than what was agreed at that time in 2020. That's the difference. But the sales agreed in 2021 was higher than the one that was agreed in 2022. Now, if we come down to London, right? Sales that have been agreed in the first quarter of 2022 in London already has surpassed what it was in 2021 in London. So, look at it. Generally, in the UK property market, more sales were agreed in the first quarter of 2021 than was agreed in the first quarter of 2022, right? But then if you now bring it down, narrow it down to cities and locations and geographical locations, I'm picking out London. In the first quarter of 2022 alone, the sales that have been agreed in the first quarter of 2022 in London is now more than what was agreed in the first quarter of 2021 in London. What does that tell us? That the cities are beginning to pick up again. Activities are beginning to pick up again in the cities. The cities are beginning to come back to life. Properties are beginning to, bounce back in the city market. You know what this really means? If somebody had taken a risk, yeah, a calculated one, when everybody was rushing out of the city, if somebody had been a smart investor and gone into the cities and picked up properties at very cheap prices, by now that investor will be smiling, because that is what Warren Buffett was saying when he said, when people are becoming greedy, right, you become scared. When people are becoming scared, you become greedy. Yeah, when people are leaving the markets, that's when you as an investor should be entering the market. And when people are rushing into the market, that's when you as a smart investor should be exiting the market. So a lot of people who apply that principle by now, they would have locked in such great values in the properties, because now and in the future, those properties that they bought at a very cheap rate in those cities would appreciate significantly in the future. But then, if you were doing that, say if in 2020, if in 2020 you went into the city property markets and you were buying up properties in the city and you had the funds, you were buying up properties in the city, trust me, a lot of people would have considered you, a mad person. They would have been like, is he okay? What is he doing? And what it would have done, it would have tied down your capital, basically. Yeah, you would have bought properties that really are not are not increasing in value. They have dropped in value, and you bought those properties. It would have been a speculative purchase then. But then, if you had held on, by now that the prices are picking up, activities are picking up, that would tell you that in the near future, that property would have appreciated significantly. Because trust me, this city, that was just a temporary setback for UK cities. What happened in the pandemic was never meant to be a permanent dent on UK city property market. It was just meant to be temporary. And if anybody had sat it out, if anyone has just been smarter and said, I am going into the city and I'm going to buy properties because the prices have really dropped, you are going to pick up some fantastic deals in the city, then, and by now, you will be sitting back, rolling on your chairs and smiling and just say, well, I think I did well by doing this. So that tells us that city life is coming back because the restrictions have been lifted. So activity levels in the first quarter of 2020 have really picked up because of this strong buyer demand and because of the strong starts to the year. So sales that have been agreed in the first quarter of 2022 has really surpassed the expectation. It has really surpassed the expectation and even the prediction of a lot of professionals who thought that by the first quarter of 2022 was gonna, record a slow start. But it has been far from a slow start. So now, to give you another insight into what the activity levels have been like, let's look at what the report said about how long it takes to agree a sale. So this report by Zoopla said that for properties that were sold within 6 months, right, it took an average of 29 days from when the property was listed to when sale was agreed. 29 for properties that were sold within 6 months. It took an average of 29 days from listing the property to sale being agreed. That's fantastic. And that is way down from what it was by this time last year, by the first quarter of last year. And because of that, you see, that gives you an idea, an indication of what the level of activity has been like in the UK property market in the first quarter of this year. 29 days on average from listing to agreeing a sale. So that tells that properties are being picked up, a double quick matches, the speedy alarming rate. Okay, so that's what demand has looked like, and what those are the factors that have affected demand. So what's the outlook like? What does Zoopla think the property market is going to look like in this year? So from this report, what Zoopla thinks is that the strong window, the strong buyer demand window that we had in the first quarter of this year, at the beginning of this year, Zoopla thinks is going to be temporary. It's going to be a short-term thing. And then as the year goes by, they think that demand, as the year goes by, they think that demand is going to slow down, and that actually property activity levels are going to come down to what they were pre-pandemic. That's what Zoopla thinks, that demand is going to slow down as the year goes by, and the property activity levels are going to come down to what they were pre-pandemic levels. That the strong demand that we have experienced in the beginning of this year is going to be a short-term thing, but it's not going to carry on like that throughout the year. In the course of 2022, Zoopla thinks that there will be a slowdown. Why would there be a slowdown? There are a few economic headwinds that Zoopla had pointed out that was going to affect property demand levels and property activity levels. Things like the high cost of living, things like the higher mortgage interest rates, things like uncertainties in the global economy, especially now with the war going on in Russia and Ukraine, you know. So these are some of the things that Zoopla highlighted, saying that these things are gonna kind of apply brakes, you know, to the property market and the property demand and activity levels in the UK property market. Now listen, these things are not meant to be taken as gospel. If you are an active player in the property market, you go out and do your due diligence, do your own research, and make your own decision based on that. But these are just, you know, they are guides, they are predictions, you know, by researchers in Zoopla, based on what they have seen, based on what has happened, and based on what they think is going to happen and the information available. Nobody knows what's going to happen the next hour. Talk more of next week. The UK property market, if there is anything it has taught us since the pandemic, is that it has defied all odds. In most cases, it has defied all predictions. All right? When people are thinking that the market is going to slow down, that's when it's going on full speed. When people are thinking the market was going to disappear, that's when the market has refused to go anyway. So I would take that this outlook, this prediction by Zoopla with a pinch of salt, and just, you know, keep being updated, keep being informed, keep following the trends in the marketplace, and making sure that you have the information you need to make an informed decision. That way, you're not going to be taken by surprise, and you're going to take full advantage of whatever opportunities the market presents. And to keep yourself up to date always, please make sure you are always here with us every Wednesday, because this is where we talk about everything properties and mortgages and things related to UK properties. And it is our duty, and we have made it our bounden duty, to always keep you updated, always keep you informed, always keeping you educated on everything properties, especially relating to UK property market. So thank you very much for spending your time with us again. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you again same time next week. Before then, we're going to see you on Monday in our Modesty's Money Masterclass. Join our Modesty's Money Masterclass Facebook group, where we share all kinds of knowledge about money, about finance, personal finance, businesses, and, you know, financial life in general. And on Monday, we're going to see you at 12 o'clock. And on Wednesday next week, same time again, same medium, we're going to see you again. And till then, enjoy the rest of the week. God bless you all. Take care and goodbye. Yeah.